no one is ever in a position where we actually have nothing, because we have our brains, we have our creativity, we have our energy. And by giving stuff out, it's actually not giving at all. It's actually earning a community. Hello, my name is Glenn Kaino, and I'm an artist living and working in Los Angeles. One of the things that has been the most valuable for me throughout my career is the idea of collaboration and teamwork. I remember getting out of school and saying, wow, like these ideas are big. How am I, as a young artist with no resources and without a pathway even, how am I going to achieve any of these things that I see other great artists achieving? And the thing that came to mind early in my career was teamwork. And I always felt like, wow, maybe it's a temporary stop where I will put my ego aside a little bit and like learn to work with someone else, and together we'll do something bigger than the two of us. And what I found is that not just 1 + 1 = 2, 1 + 1 unlocked like 4 or 8, because when I was able to work with people with very complementary skill sets, the ability for us to like make ground and tackle big ideas and learn from each other happened exponentially faster than it would have by myself, because the problems that we have faced, the problems we are facing, and the problems that are right around the corner are immense. What I think is common to when I was younger is just the fear of entering the world. And I think everyone who's young has an insecurity of their value. I mean, at least I did, and I do on a daily basis. You're like, well, why am I doing this? And how is anything I'm gonna say have any value when there are millions and thousands of people before me that have either said something that's similar or have ideas that are really smart? I think that fear has led to us putting a priority on the one thing that people can't take from us, which is our own story. When our story is the only thing that they can't take away from us, perhaps that's the one thing that we should lean on. The political winds that are coming are actually using a very basic strategic formulation in order to divide and conquer. And that's how conservatism, in different ways is oppressive and wins, because diversity is a problem because it's diverse. It's beautiful because it's diverse, but it's also challenging because without collaboration and without empathy and without understanding, it's sort of basic art of war stuff, which it's easier to conquer tiny little tribes of small ideas if you're working from a dominant vantage point. In the long run, like every good story, if the masses can get together and actually understand that we all can collaborate and get along, like the actual group is actually bigger. The group of diversity is bigger than the group of like homogeny, but we're not there right now. Right now I think we are very divided. Not just like polar between right and left or whatever, but I think like everyone's very divided, and that leaves like a pretty easy landscape for a small minority to actually, and by that I mean like, certain political regimes, like to actually like swamp up and best each other in the ideas, because like, a lot of the smaller ideas that are beautiful and, maybe more niche or radical, they're all individual, When I was younger, I was kicked out of 5 high schools. I was, sort of crossed paths and meandered through, sort of Asian gang culture or whatever, and in Asian gang culture, because for me there was a lack of representation of Asian Americans. They were all 100% negative. And as an young Asian man, I was like, that's not me, I don't see myself. And one of the problems was sort of this notion of like masculinity or whatever, and I found a surrogate in Asian gangs, and that was not the right, sort of social move. But I was like, oh, there's a strength in numbers there. It's not necessarily healthy. I ended up like not staying there, but there's a strength in numbers situation going on there. And then when I was in undergrad at UC Irvine, I sort of was really like, the UC Irvine undergrad program was an extremely diverse program, led by a woman named Catherine Lord, put together the most diverse group of scholars and professors. And I was like, wow, this is the landscape of the world of ideas that are diverse. And it was contested sometimes, like the meetings of the faculty meetings and the students, it was not always smooth, but it was rich with ideas. And rich with like diverse vantage points. And I was like, oh, this is like really an interesting dynamic for me to learn from. And then I went on to grad school to study post-colonial studies and art making and film. And I was like, okay, so there is a strength and a beauty of ideas, and if you blur your eyes, all those ideas are simply efforts from really smart and passionate people about the world being a more inclusive space. They all are aligned, but they're in different lanes. If we blur our eyes, they all go to the same place, and they all to a place where we are all valued, where our stories are respected, and where we are all seen. How do we go catalyze a situation where the world sees us the way we see each other? And that was really some of the more foundational moments of learning. And then the first thing I did was I started to create art groups, just that would super diverse art groups. So I co-created a group called Favela. It was like a very diverse group of artists and writers. We produced a website that was one of the first, if not the first, website to put artists of color and women and diverse art, LGBTQ plus artists on the internet. And we were creating representation, creating moments of representation, intersectional moments of representation where everyone could be seen. And they were seen in a way that was juxtaposed with each other in order to create that slippage. So I go, oh, these two radically different ideas are actually doing the same thing. They're just executed in a different format, from different artists that might be different colors or different genders. But we're all getting to the same place. So when I got out of school, I thought that everything had already been done. And that was many, many years ago. But again, I think that's a common thing that everyone feels like, especially now when pretty much everything has been done, it's on YouTube. But I was introduced to a concept that I still utilize today, which is called kit bashing, K-I-T bashing. I speak fast, so sometimes people think I say kid bashing, and no, that's not what I mean. But kit bashing, and it's a science fiction model maker's term from the 60s and 70s. That means using a model kit without the instructions, just to build other stuff, right? And so back in the day, like Star Wars, the Millennium Falcon, like these spaceships mostly were kit bashed. A friend told me that, introduced that to me, and I grew up with like West Coast hip hop culture as well. Some of my great friends are some of the best scratch DJs in the world, and thinking about reconfiguration and sort of configuring pieces, I was like, oh well, that is something that is something I understand. I understand the idea of taking existing things, remixing them, scratching them, manipulating them, collaging them, and making something new. And so this kit bashing term became something that I think about and do often in terms of my sculptural work. And then I realized I actually do that at a higher level. I always say I use art and the opportunities associated to art to put together people, places, things, ideas that don't normally have a chance to connect. And art is sort of the convening factor and has the magical properties to be able to go do that, and because of that, when I started to work on some of the bigger projects I've ever done, collaborating with a performing artist, magician named Derek Delgadio for many years, or collaborating with Tommy Smith. These ideas and these moments and these projects are much bigger than any of us individually. But at the beginning of every collaboration, there's a moment where, myself and the other collaborator sat down and effectively realized, like, okay, we have both really big goals, and largely they have to do with change making. Largely they have to do with affecting the zeitgeist and how the world sees each other or sees a particular issue, and how we're going to get there. More often than not, the answer is, well, we have to get there together because there's just not enough time to do anything else. If I collaborate with someone across the world who has an entirely different worldview, who has an entirely different upbringing, whose language itself maybe is a different language and has nuance that English that I learned doesn't have, and therefore has social cues and just different levels of beauty or poetics that I don't know. If I can collaborate with them, and I have like an analytical framework based on Western canon, and they have this beautiful blah, 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 together, maybe we can come up with something and catalyze an idea that doesn't normally happen in one selfish lifeline. One of the other things that I think that is a big issue, in learning how to collaborate is the idea of fairness. Because everyone, the concept of fairness is subjective, right? And so if we say, let's go meet in the middle, our version and idea of what the middle is going to be different. And I think all too often people have a concept of what fair is or what sharing is or what equal is, and they think about it like as like, oh, there's like a fair line and we're gonna go meet in the middle and this is like fair, you know? And what happens is, in fairness, is like if one person is off, there's a gap, we can all see the gap. People don't know where the gap is on which side, and then that gap expands because then people like test and see, and next thing you know, this gap like widens, right? So again, in collaboration, for me, for all of my partners and team, I sort of always extol that sort of value of like over-delivering selflessly, because, and even without expectation of being compensated, because if you over-deliver and we take that as an expectation, right? It's not like something where you're doing it generosity out of the goodness of your heart. No. Like we all have to like think about generosity as an expectation, so that when there is a mistake, because we're humans and make mistakes, and that gap goes, we're still connected. And that's a concept too that I think that is a super important one, not as a backup, but as a must-have in relationship to making collaborations work. Because I've seen way too many partnerships of really great projects fail, because at the end everyone says, that just wasn't fair. That person didn't treat me right, I wasn't split, wasn't the fair split, or this, that, the other, and you're like, oh, well, you all had expectations that just somehow created a gap, and then, you know, unfortunately for the world, some of the best cool projects in the world have failed for those reasons. And this is something that I struggle with daily also. I mean, I overcome it often, and I say struggle because like you can emotionally feel this, right? Like when you're in a moment of insecurity, and when you feel like you don't have anything, and you need to earn things, it's very hard to have the first thing you think about be generosity. And I can imagine that young artists who feel that they don't have anything yet or haven't achieved anything yet are in the mode of accumulation, right? I need to accumulate access, I need to accumulate opportunity, I need to accumulate resources, whether it's economic or otherwise. And when you're in a mode where you feel you have nothing and your need is to bring things in, it's very hard to think about someone giving you the advice to give things out. But the reality is, I've found that no one is ever in a position where we actually have nothing, because we have our brains, we have our creativity, you know, we have our energy. And by giving stuff out, it's actually not giving at all. It's actually earning a community. And I've only had the opportunity show me that every time I've been generous, generosity has been reciprocated, you know, and I'm a testament to say, a couple decades in, it comes back not just 1-to-1, it comes back 5-to-1, you know, and because kindness and generosity are invaluably authentic moments that you cannot buy, and collaborations can't buy that. You know, now we're operating at a decently high level and making a lot of work. The community that I've been fortunate enough to help build around myself in the studio and the team that we have, you know, there are decades-long investments that I've made, that the team's made in each other, that have all just been selfless in ways to just catalyze moments of connection to make people feel safe. You know, to make people feel that this is a team and a place that's going to always try and do their best, and then you get the best work and you get the best, the best time, you know, and we're fighting the struggle together, you know. So that's where I think it's counterintuitive logic, but you know, when I say I'm still struggling with it now, I mean, like, you know, we're always in a cycle of trying to figure out how to sustain the studio, sustain the practice, sustain some of these projects, make bigger change, and it's hard, you know? Someone's like, I don't know if I can afford to do that, I don't have time to do that, and you're like, you know, you gotta do it, and it's the right thing to do, we're gonna do the right thing, and we're just gonna put it out into the world and have faith, you know, that it will come back, and if it doesn't come back right now, it'll come back later, and my studio, at least, this is like a long-term ecosystem of trust and giving, and everyone who walks in here it all signs up to, like, you know, play in that game. I mean, you get burned sometimes, and it's okay. I literally, like, I have been generous to people and I've gotten burned, and it's sad, but even in the times when I've been generous and it's been unreciprocated because someone's unhealthy or someone is also in pain and in a different way, and you have to give everyone grace, but that, for at least from my model, people disappointing me is part of the model. Because I as someone who's saying this to you and talking to other artists, if I also expected everyone to be perfect, it's not, that isn't fair, and so people disappointing me is part of the program. I think our team is a model of how we see the world, in that we collaborate with every type of person, and it's super exciting and doing really robust work. And I think that's, again, it's a prototype, let's say, for me to be part of, how we hope the world would be. People who respect each other, respect our differences, not ignore them at all. Lean into them, in order to catalyze something new between cultures, something that's additive, something that's better and more robust. We all have both our cultural upbringing, we have our social upbringing, we have then our higher education or not, or whatever. We all have our different paths to where we are, and no one's story is super flat. Everyone's story is multidimensional and complex, and so the wonderful sort of moment of exchange is when all those get together and we get to see something new that's exciting and dynamic and inventive and whatnot, and not worried about sort of retroactively bringing back the past in a way. How do we build a cool future together that is fun? Because we're only going to win the hearts of people by showing a future that is better, and by better, more joyful and fun, and inclusive. And I think that where we're at right now because of pain, and people feeling scared and nervous. And that's understandable. Most people in the world, just because of the human subjective conscious, they wake up insecure about something, wake up fearful of something, and whatever resources you have, you're gonna defend those. Young people these days are even more so growing up with everything you could possibly want to know is available in a much faster way. The beauty of the camaraderie is something that greatly outweighs any of that. When y'all get to make my work look dingy, I'm like, that's great. We've won and we're in a much better place.